You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObscast.com. Okay, welcome back to the TV Obsessive podcast here today for episode 42. As always, I'm Cameron Crane, executive editor for TVObsessive.com, joined by Ryan Kirksey, writer and contributor for the site. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing well. We are finally in spring. Things are looking good. New stuff on the way. I was wondering if you wanted to record today with us talking through a tape recorder. Would that make this podcasting better or worse? What do you think?
Yeah, well, this is a Fisher Price one, and
Yes, I got one ready to go.
little clickies in between each sentence. Yeah. So we're I don't know why it stands out to me that it's a Fisher Price tape recorder. Like, why does it have to be a toy tape recorder?
I wonder if they paid for that, honestly. Of course, that's just my naive mind. But we'll get to this, but yeah, why does it making it
Yeah,
so obvious to us?
it's possible. So we're operating under the principle that product placements are not a spoiler. We are going to be talking about Constellation on the latter part of the pod today. Continuing with that, this is the seventh episode, aka the penultimate episode, I guess, of the season. So looking forward to talking through that. First, though, as per usual, we'll hit on some stuff that's been in the news this week that's caught our eye. We think there's worth saying things about. So yeah, it's March 21st. We are recording this on Thursday, so this might drop a little bit early for people. I don't think anyone will mind. Anyhow, what caught your eye in the news this week, Ryan?
Well, it is March, but I thought maybe we'd talk about June a little bit. Back when you and I were growing up, Cameron, the summer, we took the summers off with TV. But
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen some of the news lately. We already knew about the Bear coming back in June. Now we're going
Mhm.
to get House of the Dragon coming back in June. We're going to get the Acolyte coming in June. We've got a lot of stuff coming, and we got trailers for a couple of those things. I thought maybe start with House of the Dragon because this was a very interesting approach to trailers that were dropped today.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, and I wonder about the shift. I feel like here's my read on it. I feel like when we were young, there was a sentiment that, well, it's summertime. People are going to be outside doing stuff.
Yeah, right.
You know, we're not going to release new TV in the summertime, and they just show reruns. And
Yeah.
over the course of time, I guess they learned like it doesn't matter. People watch new TV in the summer. People don't go outside. Like
People take off work in the summer and are looking for things to do in the
it's too
summer.
hot.
Yeah.
Too hot to go outside. Stay in the AC and
Yeah.
watch House of the Dragon. Yeah. Yeah, presume that will drop weekly, so carry through a
Oh,
good part of the
Lord,
summer.
please, yes, drop weekly.
I'm sure it will. I mean, this is
Yeah, it
HBO
will.
and everything. What did you think of the dueling trailers? I thought this was kind of interesting. We had one sort of focused on I was going to say House Black, but that's
Yeah.
is that right? As a way to
Well, yeah.
one's black and one's green.
Yeah, so there is basically the way that the House of the Dragon is set up is there are two factions on either side. One is represented by the color green, Allison. One is on the Targaryen side is represented by the color black. So they've released a black trailer. Are you on Team Black? And they've released a Team Green trailer. Are you on Team Green? And so really setting up this brewing war that got started at the end of season one. A lot of talk of battles, a lot of dragons flying around. So this is where the violence is going to really kick in for this series.
Yeah, and I'm in. Again, I probably said this to you before on here that I don't necessarily think the show is good.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't make the argument. I was always a little on the fence about that with the Game of Thrones, actually. I thought, of course, it's like very well produced, it's well acted, it's very entertaining, but some people who got to the level of suggesting that it was by good here, I mean something like deep, something like
Mhm.
meaningful.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that Game of Thrones was. Come at me if you want. House the Dragon, kind of even less so, but it just looked like, this is fun. I'm
Yeah.
in. I am curious. As I recall, in the end of the first season, they kind of split the finale in this way, basically, where you had one episode that focused on the one faction and their perspective, and then the next that went to the other. And now with these competing trailers, I wonder how much it's going to might be like that in season two. That could be really interesting and maybe a
Yeah.
little risky if they actually embraced like episode 1 is going to be from the perspective of this faction, episode 2 is from the perspective of that
Yeah.
faction.
That's a great observation. Now that you say that, that would not surprise me if they did that at least the first maybe 4 episodes of the season, let's say, before the conflict really starts. The other criticism that I think that show got was there were some real time jumpy things that people thought didn't make sense or couldn't follow. So there's no more of that. That's gone. These are the characters really going to stick with us until the end. But I might like to see what they could do if they have all right, this is going to be the black strategy episode and the green strategy episode, and sort of what are we planning and plotting and scheming. That might be interesting to see, but I do think certainly by mid-season we're going to see a lot of these two groups coming together.
Like obviously if they're like actually fighting when we have
Yeah.
battle scenes, then they're, but there's still a question of what perspective are you taking on that. And the release of the 2 trailers, and in the background the fact that they did that at the end of season 1 makes me really curious to see how much they do that sort of thing, because playing with perspective is where this could be kind of more interesting than it might be otherwise. You are naturally kind of prone to be sympathetic to the side that you're getting the story from.
Yes.
So to go back and forth, I don't know.
That
Are you
that would be
firmly on a
great.
side in this story, by the way?
No, I'm just on the side of tell a good story with a proper ending. That's the side I'm on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully
We'll
they will.
we'll get to we get to something related to that later on when we talk about other stuff. But anyway, that's only one thing coming in June. We talked about the bear last week, and we got the I don't know. I feel like I keep using the phrase highly anticipated with these Star Wars shows, but maybe just the next in line Star Wars show, The Acolyte. I don't know how familiar you are with your Star Wars eras, but this is representing what they call the High Republic era. It's something that's been popular in novelizations, but never been on screen before.
So
So
this would be pre-prequel.
this is pre-prequel, about 150 years before the Phantom Menace. This is when Jedis are thriving. There's thousands of them. There's peace in the galaxy. There's nothing going on. And then all of a sudden, there's this threat. So this way, this is set up, at least I can see from the trailer, it's almost like a murder mystery. Someone is going around murdering Jedis. Who has the power to do that? How do we
Anakin Skywalker. Okay.
Yeah.
Spoiler
So no one that
sorry.
we have seen on any kind of screen with Star Wars before will be in this show, which to me I think is actually a good thing. We should tell a new story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing. Personally, I've seen the like 9 main movies and Rogue One, because people kept saying it was good. I didn't much care for it. And I didn't care for the prequels, and I didn't care for the sequel trilogy, except The Last Jedi was kind of all right, and I gave up on Star Wars. And people yell at me. Like I grew up with the original trilogy and
Yeah.
all of that, so it's like, okay, I have some familiarity with the broad strokes along those lines. But I will say one of my disappointments with Rise of Skywalker in particular, that's what it was called, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, God, everything doesn't have to relate to the Skywalkers and Emperor
Yeah.
Palpatine. And it was like, I was really disappointed by some of the things they did. That not only I was already kind of disappointed with how the sequel trilogy was doing, like Force Awakens was like A New Hope over again with a new Death
Yeah.
Star but bigger or something. And I was already kind of feeling like, don't you have fresh ideas? And I finally decided that they just didn't. So I guess yes. Okay. So I think that the idea of doing something that is meaningfully separate,
Yeah.
or it's
And
before, and in a way
the
could
only
be.
piece of continuity that should exist in this show is whatever seeds are planted here is what eventually allows for things like Palpatine and Darth Maul to exist in the prequel. So that's sort of the origins, I guess.
Yeah, probably I shouldn't get too ahead of myself. It'll be like, who's doing it? And the answer ends up being like, it's a young Palpatine.
Yeah. I think at
um,
least I hope this is many, many years before he is born, but we'll see.
I don't know. No offense. If people like Star Wars, you like Star Wars. That's great. Enjoy what you enjoy. I've
Yeah.
got no problem with other people. I never want to like tell
Yeah.
people they shouldn't enjoy things that they enjoy. So don't take any of my negative remarks that way.
Yeah.
I just personally was disappointed by the prequels.
Yeah.
That's never changed. Like some people are like, "Oh, enough time has passed. I look back at them and say, oh, they're pretty good." No, I still think that they're quite bad, actually. So, um,
Well, that's June. So when you can't find me that month, that's why I'll be diving into that stuff.
oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot too. I feel like I just saw something else that I'm not recalling right now. Um, that was also going to be in
Yeah, it
June.
might be. I
Um,
may have this wrong, but I think maybe the boys might be coming back in June.
yeah, I think The Boys is coming back in June. There's like a whole bunch of stuff where looking at upcoming release dates, we've been in a little bit of a lull period,
Mhm.
and it's going to pick up. In April, there's a number of things coming out, and then there's some stuff in May, and then stuff in
Yeah,
June. And it's a little bit weird, it's like
yeah.
more stuff in July, more stuff in August, and then are we going to get the old school fall premiere season? Are we just past
Ugh.
that? We'll see.
Yeah, does that even exist? That'll be a good question.
On that note, one thing that is slated for the fall, season 3 of Heartstopper, which I have not watched, but I know that some people really love, including a few people associated with the site and my cousin. You ever watch Heartstopper?
No, this is I was thinking and I read this. We need like a weekly segment that is Ca Cameron knows things that Ryan has never heard of before, and so this is what this week's is. I've never heard of this nor seen this show.
Well, the fact that I want to bring it up, it's like there's I don't know what, there's a purview or something that I have with something like this where it's not that I am a fan of the show, but I
Yeah.
know people who are really into the show who would care about this, and we do have articles on the site and so on and so forth. So I feel like it's worth mentioning. Heartstopper is an adaptation of a series of graphic novels, I believe, and there's quite a fan base there. So season 3, I think it's in October. Thought that was worth mentioning. But I don't have a whole lot more to say about it because again, I haven't gotten around to watching it because there's too much TV. Let's make that say.
Good one.
Everyone knows there's too much TV.
How much TV is there, Cameron?
Well, according to her name's Lucia Recalda. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, as I probably am. This is the European Commission. She calculated how
Hmm.
long it would take to watch everything on every streaming service at present. I think this may include films, I guess, but she
Okay.
does make a note that it does not include things like video games or any of that kind of interactive stuff. And by her calculations, it would take a person 350 years.
Oh my gosh. Considering TV has existed for like what, 80 years?
Yeah, right. So much of this is recent, of course, and the real boom in the streaming era, and that's part of what people refer to as peak TV.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't know if you ever had this experience. I recall one time standing in my college library as an undergraduate, and I'm in like the eighth floor of this library, and I'm looking around and thinking, if I started right now, I could probably not finish every book on this floor before I
Yeah,
died,
that's
you
right.
know? So it's not the worst thing. And if we're thinking about TV, of course, a lot of it's not good.
No,
Not
no.
to be
Why
too
would
harsh, but
why would you want to? Yeah,
um, I don't know. I don't, there's no way to quickly apply some kind of standard to try to say, well, how many years would it take you to watch the things that are worth your time? But that note's worth making, and maybe that relates to the thing that you had on this, where the Sony
yeah.
guy, Wayne
As
Garvey,
we
what he was saying.
progress down the road of peak TV, this has been I mean, something that all the studios, all of the streamers, all of the production houses are looking at is, right, how much do we do? How much is too much? Are we oversaturating? And so I just found it interesting. This guy, his name is Wayne Garvey. He's the president of international productions at Sony Pictures, particularly the television side. he said that the end of peak TV, all this drama that's going on right now, sort of if it was to funnel down, be sort of diminish somewhat, quote, might be a good thing. So, that's interesting to say from someone whose job is to run a TV studio.
Hmm.
He's saying maybe there's too much. There's, the paradox of choice. There is, you can't ever pick something. Things have been filtered to the point where they're just not quality anymore. And so, are we turning that corner? I don't know that the signs are there yet, but we might be.
Yeah, well, we hit on some stats however many weeks ago about a downtick in the number of new shows
Mhm.
produced, although my note there was this is still a lot. I don't
Yeah.
recall the numbers off the top of my head. I don't know if they were at like the same conference or whatever. I kind of got that feeling. Maybe they were, that was the source for both of these stories, but it's worth thinking about. Yeah, maybe they're making less shows. Look, from a certain point of view, I would want to argue that that would be good
Yeah. Yeah.
to put the resources in the right places
Yeah.
to produce things that are worth watching and so on and so forth. But my worry, and I know we've talked about this before, is
Yeah.
whether it'll work out in the other direction where less shows means taking less chances,
Yeah.
taking less risks, um, focusing more and more on things that are established IP and which might be fine. I'm not saying that everything that's an adaptation is bad or anything, but um certainly my favorite things personally end up not being that. They end up being like Severance,
Yeah.
Yellow Jackets, things that really seem a bit more kind of novel, original, and maybe a bit more risky. So
Yeah, and that's one
um
thing I think we risk losing as streamers are inevitably consolidating as things move into fewer and fewer platforms. These risks that are willing to be taken, as you put it, without some of these big risks and swings that could end up in strikeouts. Just think about the past 15 years, we wouldn't have had things like Breaking Bad or The Curse or other things like that many people passed on, but eventually someone said, "Yeah, let's do it," and then we all benefit from that. So yeah, it's a tough thing to try to figure out one way or the other.
yeah, Breaking Bad remains this interesting example because it was apparently really hard for them to get their shopping it around everywhere. It was finally AMC was willing to take a chance on it. And then it didn't do super well at first, but once it got to
Yeah,
Netflix streaming, well, it built momentum, by the time it became very widely watched by the time it
exactly.
ended. And you have to wonder, would that happen anymore? Or
Yeah,
would it just,
exactly.
even if it got a chance, would it just get canceled after two seasons or one season or what have you? But we'll try not to be too pessimistic. Um, let's see. Travis Kelsey. I don't even know
Is
why I
he
put
about to
this
be
on
more famous? Is he about to
here.
marry some? I'm not on the Kelsey.
um, apparently Travis Kelsey is in talks at least to host a reboot of Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Oh, the old Jeff Foxworthy show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay. Which I contend we used to watch this. Those were not fifth grade level questions. I
Yeah.
have to, I mean, maybe I'm outing myself here. Those were not fifth grade level questions.
So you're telling me you're not smarter than a fifth grader?
I'm not smarter than that level of fifth grader. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there was always that. I never watched the show a whole lot. Um, reading about this did make me realize how long ago it was on. It wasn't as recent as I thought it was,
Yeah, this was
actually.
all, I mean,
It's like
almost 20
15
years
years
ago
ago.
now.
Yeah, 15, 20 years ago or whatever. So I don't know. That could be interesting. I fully expect in one way or another, Travis Kelsey is going to become a media figure post NFL career. To my understanding, though, he is playing in the NFL again
Yeah.
this year. So
Yeah, his brother has retired. They had this wildly popular podcast that the two of them do together. I mean, clearly people know that Travis Kelsey and Taylor Swift are together. I mean, talk about whoever helped him develop this strategy for what he's going to do the rest of his life. This is the knowing the NFL is, maybe a couple years left. This is about as smart as you can get for this guy.
yeah. So anyway, that's out there. I just thought
Yeah.
that was, I don't know, I thought that was reminding. Maybe a bit more interesting is we've hit on this before. The talks, the rumors, the things in
Yeah.
the air about a potential reboot of The Office.
Yeah.
A bit more information here, and this actually makes me a couple steps more intrigued than I was
Mm.
previously.
I
Um,
am I'm tracking with you on this because my understanding, and I sort of compared the notes we have here in this deadline piece with some things that I've heard still listen weekly to the Jenna Fisher, Angela Kinsey podcast,
yeah,
where they have said, it really have to be right, really have to be everybody to come together and get a reboot or reunion together. So they sort of minimize that. But this story here that you showed me, this could be a sort of a different telling of an office altogether, maybe just in the same universe.
right. So this almost sounds more like a sequel or
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
actually. And the involvement of Michael Coleman, who, for the record, I'm not super familiar with, but as I was reading this and I was like looking at his writing credits and so on, worked on Nathan for You and some other things that I enjoy in terms of comedy. So that'd be it could be quite interesting if the idea is we're going to do something in the same world as The Office, and that would have the door open potentially for characters from The Office
yeah,
to show up.
yeah.
I think we take it a step further and say, well, Parks and Recreation was already in the same universe as The Office.
Exactly.
Let's just accept that. They can have cameos too. I don't. I kind of always thought that there was never any confirmation of that, but
Yeah.
um,
This sounds a lot like sort of not exactly. I'm thinking about the Fuller House model where, it was focusing on the daughters. And then every once in a while, John
mm,
Stamos and Dave Coulier would pop in and do a, little bit every few episodes or so. I don't know if this is necessarily like that. Like they're planning on, BJ Novak and Jenna Fisher coming in every 5 episodes, almost like it'd be here's this guy one time and then gone. And then here's, Brian Baumgartner one episode and then gone, just sort of pop in type things.
yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like the idea is for the real through line to be the documentary filmmakers,
Mm.
which is weird because that was all. It was always a little odd in terms of how that fit in with The Office, but um, some indications it would seem in this article that maybe it's not even going to be in an office. So
Yep.
I don't know. It's a lot of stuff that's kind of intriguing to me here and makes me more on board with it than when the rumors seem to be, hey, they're talking about rebooting, they're reviving The Office. It seems like this is not nearly as straightforward as just
Yeah.
rehashing an old idea.
I get that impression as well that maybe somewhere down the road there's a, 1 hour reunion special or something, but not a series coming by any means.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of old sitcoms, we'll hit the David Schwimmer note, right? David Schwimmer is going
Okay.
to be in Goosebumps. How do we feel
Hey,
about that?
good for him. I think the last time I remember seeing David Schwimmer, this is just, again, your plug of things, my plug for you, things you're missing. He was on one of the more recent seasons of Curb, where he was starring in a musical, and Larry was, just always at David Schwimmer's throat about something, and I imagine it's going to be a completely different role. But this Goosebumps got extremely good numbers on Disney Plus last year. I mean, obviously this is marketed towards young kids and put it out around Halloween time, but hey, good for him. I mean, going to go star in something again, looks like coming in the fall.
Yeah, and I guess they're going an anthology model.
Yeah.
So Tim Glarden wrote something on the first season for the site, TVObscast.com, Goosebumps, and he really rather liked it. He's a fan of Goosebumps from back in the day and all of
Yeah.
that. I guess this doesn't really connect with. Do you recall that there was a Goosebumps show on when we
Oh,
were kids?
oh yes. And
And
yes.
yeah,
So the books, I was all over that.
yeah. So this doesn't really connect up with that. And then the one bit of disappointment it seemed from Tim was that it was they're making season two, but it's going to be an anthology style, and that maybe that means it's not going to resolve some things in season one. Like there were some things in season one that he's hoping would be resolved. So kind of curious to see how they handle that, or if there's going to be any connection, or if they're just going to say, hey, Some mysteries are mysteries.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine.
get those kids started early on the idea that we don't have to answer every question. It's left open to your interpretation.
It's a plot hole, right?
That's right.
So, no. So yeah, well, we got that going for us. So that, and when I feel like I had one more thing. Oh yeah, this I don't know anything about this. This is hardly even newsworthy in my mind, but apparently, um, Weiss and Benioff tried to get Barack Obama to do a cameo in Three Body Problem, and he said no.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So I mean, I presume you're familiar that this probably been 12, 15 years now. Obama has put out this yearly sort of things that I enjoyed this year list, and it's movies, and
Mm-hmm.
it's books, and it's other, other things that he consumed. And he at one point, I mean, made a point to highlight the Three Body Problem book. Obviously, this book came out in Chinese in 2006, in English a few years later, and he was apparently just, I mean, consumed by it and thought it was fascinating. We'll have to talk about it here in a second and relate to the show, and was such a fan of it that, yeah, Benioff and Weiss said, maybe we can get him to make an appearance in some way. And he says, I'll save my talent for when there's a real problem to deal
Yeah.
with.
So, do you think they wanted him to?
I'm trying to avoid any spoilers for what the plot of this might be. I think people generally understand, but
Do you think they wanted him to be the president in the show, or
I would hope so. That would
okay?
that would be great. Yeah.
I mean that's my thought. Not like. Do you remember? I was about to call it George W. Bush's cameo in Game of Thrones. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where they had like a George W. Bush mask on. Was a head on a spike.
Yeah.
Um, Anyhow, I know you're watching Three Body Problem. You've been reading the book. You're writing on the show for the site. How's it going?
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're recording now on Thursday afternoon the 21st, the recap of the first episode is up. Planning to do a couple more pieces about sort of the middle episodes and then a piece on the finale. They'll all be up over the days to come. But yes, so this debuted today on the 21st. Was able to finish the first of the three books before this came out. My understanding from things that I'm consuming and from what I've watched is there this first season, I don't know if people are aware of this, is actually going to trickle a little bit into the second book. Some people
Okay.
like me have really tried to, fast forward their reading of this story, but there's two big volumes that come after this book that still need to be consumed. We don't know how many seasons are going to be in this, but all that to say, have seen about half of it so far, and I absolutely love it. I mean, I absolutely love it. I think that some of my enjoyment of it is seeing how they are adapting it, one, but two, knowing a little bit about what's to come and anticipating how they will do it. Right. I
Yeah.
think that, as you mentioned earlier, production value was high on Game of Thrones, whether the story and plot work for you, production value was high. So they have really told an interesting story here that is from a very complex piece of literature that a lot of other, this is what I talk about in my first piece. A lot of people said, no, we just can't do this. It's too dense, too scientific, too hard to tell a story. So they have done, in my mind, fantastic job for this first season from what I've seen. And boy, I hope they get the three seasons they want to tell this.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by it. We talked about this before,
Yeah.
and I haven't had the chance to watch any of it as of yet. It's on the list. It might be jumping to the top of the list. As you know, I've got quite a list. 350 years of TV I'm trying to
Yeah.
watch.
You better get started.
Someone told me that was my job. Um, but yeah, I try to find some time to check this out. And of course, I still should be watching Shogun, and people are talking about it all over the place, and I'm behind, and now it's an even bigger mountain to climb. But and Curb, I don't know what I've been doing. Honestly, I've been like watching Chris Sims Unbuttoned on YouTube
Yeah,
and stuff
you're
like
watching too
this.
much of the floor. You need to get
Yeah,
back.
yeah. No, seriously, I'm watching too much like game shows and sports talk fantasy football analysis videos and stuff. And I
Right.
don't know why. I mean, I would say for me, all of that for me fits in the same kind of really light watching experience. And maybe that's part of why. Whereas if I were to go put on Shogun, I know that that
Yeah.
requires paying attention in a more serious way as opposed to just like having something on. So I've been
Yeah.
doing a lot of the latter kind of.
There is just to sort of tie this to something. I know we have to move on, but there was a piece, and I forget who they were interviewing. I want to say it was a writer on Succession that came out of the New Yorker about how much we should expect of audiences when we produce television shows. Like, should they be able to follow everything? How complex should it be? How much will they invest? Or we know people are doing other things while they're watching television. And I think I had this right. There was sort of this writer's assertion that things can equally be good as sort of what you call sort of warm bath shows, just sort of comfort me, just let me relax and do something versus, you know, the academic textbook type shows where I really want to pour into it and study it, right? Both can be great and we need
Yeah,
both. Yeah, so good. Treat yourself to some of that stuff.
absolutely. Right. Absolutely. We got like, look, what I want, and I started thinking of this as a certain kind of standard. I don't know how long ago, maybe 10 years ago by now, at least. People talk about second screens and stuff like that. I started thinking about almost as a standard of assessment of the quality of the TV show, whether I was ever looking at my phone during it. Because I
Yep.
think the best
Yep.
ones are so gripping and so compelling that I do not. But I think like the fair point related to what you're saying, whoever you're referencing to, is I don't always want that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I don't want my life to. I don't always want to watch Twin Peaks,
exactly.
right? If I'm watching Twin Peaks, it's got me, But like that's a certain mode of engagement with television as opposed to something that you can just kind of put up something easier, basically. And I think,
And I told you before, this is why I turn on Next Level Chef and Great British Baking Show, just to let me just have something on, just to wash over me while I maybe do something else or just want to turn the brain off.
yeah, we want both, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
so don't go watering down the one kind of show like Constellation, which we're going to talk about. I think
Yeah,
it's
there we
about
go.
time to do that. I definitely, I mean, part of why I ultimately think Constellation is a very good show is you do have to attend to it and it rewards that
Yeah.
attention and it doesn't spoon feed you. And that's good. And we're
Yes.
going to be left with things that we have to think about and interpret. Um, and that's good. That's the kind of show that it is. And
Yeah.
it makes it worth talking about. So let's get to that, eh?
Let's do it.
All right. So we are up to episode 7, titled Through the Looking Glass.
Hmm.
And all spoilers will be on the table for Constellation through episode 7 on the other side of this little brief musical interlude. And we'll be back with you in about 10 seconds.
Okay, we're back with Constellation episode 7, Through the Looking Glass, written by Peter Harness, directed by Joseph Cedar. We pick up right where we left off in episode 6. And episode 7, I think it's safe to say we're switching back and forth through what we now know sort of the two main realities of this show. There are two Alice's, one Joe, that seem to continually sort of go in different places, find themselves in the other realities, other universes that are near or are part of where this cabin is out on the frozen lake. Both Alices end up finding the other rundown cabin, which is a more sort of dilapidated version of the place where they have been living, and they find a way to communicate with one another through this tape recorder. They can send each other messages. They determine that Joe is the reality that she is in the wrong one, but they don't know how to get her to return. Joe does eventually find the cabin and finds the other Alice, not her daughter Alice, carries her to safety after the cabin catches on fire. Joe attempts to revive her and tells the Alice from the world that she's not a part of, that she should return to her father, find him, stay with him. This leads Joe to being carried off by some authorities to where we understand she has been taken to Irina. Meanwhile, Henry, Frederick, and Magnus arrive at the cabin with the police. They've been tracking Joe. They thought kidnapped Alice. They find Alice. They're able to get her rescued. They take Joe into custody. And while that's going on, Henry and Bud briefly switch bodies. Again, why, how? We're going to talk through that. Henry sees Paul, who was shot. He's able to call 911. Bud is back in what is his original world, although he doesn't necessarily belong there anymore. And from what we know, the Cal device has been left out near the snow by the cabin. In the hospital, Alice sees the Valia, who we know is Irina, who offers to take her to her mother. And the last part of the episode, Alice wakes up, tells Magnus they have to get Joe back from Irina. So limited, quote unquote, space within this episode. But sort of a lot of back and forth. Where are we? Who are we with? What reality are we in? In terms of realities, we have a little bit more clarification on what we're dealing with now, I think.
Yeah, it's weird the level to which I watched this episode. I thought, well, that was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I'm writing about it. Oh, well, you have to keep straight. Which Alice am I talking about? And which Magnus am I talking about? And all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But the way that they've structured things, giving us the cabin scenes earlier, we'd already kind of been putting those together for ourselves. We're wondering if they hung together
Yes.
in this way, and we getting just a lot of it felt like confirmation of, yes, this connects up to that, this happens, and then that.
Yep.
But of course, you've got the one reality bleeding into the other, or some thought of this, the cabin in particular, and the space around it, as, I guess, a liminal space between the realities where something's going on. And how many cabins? Maybe 4, though. So it's I count
I think there's
4.
four cabins and 92 paintings from what I can tell so far. That's
Right. And sometimes there's a fire that's in the painting.
Yeah.
Not the painting's not on fire, the fire's in the painting. There's a difference.
So should we assume at this point, maybe this is presumptuous, should we assume that the cabin is this liminal space, or is it because the Cal is there nearby? Do we think the cabin is some sort of portal between what's happening? That's why what happens to Henry and Bud. How do we take that?
Yeah. Again, I think there is a question of, is it the cow that's
Yeah.
doing this? Because Joe does take it to the cabin in the one reality. Maybe that's where we're going. Personally, I'm almost going to feel a little bit disappointed if they end up hanging everything on the cow.
Yep.
But it's certainly important. And look, I should give my mea culpa. Sort of at the beginning. This is how I started my article, and I messaged you about this when I realized this.
Don't
It
be
was
too hard on yourself. This is complex stuff we're dealing with here.
it was in this episode when Joe says that she does not remember the cow prior to the accident. And I went, uh-oh. And I had stubbornly been thinking that back in episode 1, we saw Joe and Alice speaking Swedish to one another while Paul was working on the cow, right? And I know I said on here last week, so we've got at least 3 realities, right? Because there's one where Alice speaks Swedish and the cow exists. It turns out not so much. If you go back and rewatch that scene in episode 1 and really watch it closely, it is clear that we're actually switching back and forth between 2 realities as the scene unfolds.
Yeah. I mean, first, just fascinating because you would never assume that as you're watching it through the first time. But to be able to sort of now seamlessly look back and how they did that, pretty interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's virtually the first scene of the show. It's not, I think the first scene is at the cabin and then it goes to space. But it's the second scene of the entire show. So you don't have a handle on what's going on. You're not going to be thinking that, oh, well, this is going back and forth between 2 realities, or however we put that exactly when you're watching it initially. But so if you're watching the scene closely, what you see is that sometimes Paul's working on the Cal device, but in some shots he isn't. And it doesn't match up exactly, I don't think, to when they're speaking Swedish and when they're speaking English. But it does kind of seem like maybe Alice is wearing different clothes, but you can only see it through the iPad. I think every time you see her in person, she's wearing the same sweater. So you really kind of have to watch it closely. But if you do, the whole thing is going back and forth between the two realities.
Yeah, and that's kind of the stuff like you were talking about that shows that pay off these kind of things to go back and revisit and say, oh, wow, look at this creative decision. Look at what they were able to do that sort of to the naked eye we couldn't detect back then. But now that we've seen what's happening, we can go back and look and say, ah, that makes sense. Why it's Swedish to English, different clothes, Cal, no Cal. Now it all sort of is getting pieced together as this puzzle starts to slowly take shape.
Right. And then I think it was last week, right? Paul is dead. You get where we revisit it, and then there are the two Joes. So there's like the splitting of the realities there. And so I still think there might be more than two. It depends how we read all the stuff at the cabin,
Yeah.
right? Because there's more than two cabins. But it definitely seems that there are two main ones. And I wonder if there's a third
Yeah.
tying into also tying into with Bud and Henry. We've talked about this before, because their situation seems different. You've got
It
a
does.
Joe who's
Yeah.
alive and a Joe who's dead, a Paul who's alive and a Paul who's dead. Bud and Henry are both alive, but in the
Right.
different universes.
And we have sort of hypothesized perhaps that was it, or do we have the situation with Joe and Paul because one died and the other didn't? So just sort of switch places. And Bud slash Henry's situation, did both survive whatever this accident was on Apollo 18, but it still led to them switching places. I mean, clearly they have. And so
Yeah.
that's why he keeps, wondering about this death in space on his board throughout every episode.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
So they switch places, but I'm still wondering about that question of whether there's a third one who died. I don't know if we'll get an answer. Yeah, I don't know if I should stop
Yeah.
thinking about that. One possible answer is that it all has to do with the cow,
Yeah.
and that even though the stuff that happened to Henry and Irina occurred in the past, that we're dealing with retrocausality, which is also a concept in quantum mechanics. So
I admit I clicked on that link in your piece in your recap this week, so I can familiarize myself with that.
what are we talking about? There's not a good way to make the concept more intuitive.
Right.
It's the concept that an event in the future could be the cause of an effect in the past,
Yep.
and it's a theory out there to explain some of the quantum weirdness that you find in the experiments.
You said it
So
better than I could. Yeah, I just I'm just still very curious as we discussed at length last week about which questions will be answered and which will not.
you
Sort
would get
of what is the ultimate cause of this, of this thing? Is it a device? Is it a location? Is it a phenomenon in space? And are there important places, important times, important moments, sort of the loss theory that sort of joins things and allows things to happen or take place that would not otherwise happened. And this cabin or this device or this moment in time is one of those moments.
yeah. So you mentioned we've been talking about Bud and Henry just now,
Yeah.
and you mentioned them seem to switch places. Um, I don't know that it was temporary. I think you said something like that in your summary. Maybe it seemed that way, but I don't know that we saw them switch back. It kind of seemed to me that the episode left us with Henry now as Bud and Bud as Henry.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think that I agree with you. So if I said something about it being temporary, that would have been incorrect because I think that um yes, where we leave it, we have seen, I guess, them back where they were decades ago, but now also strangely in unfamiliar places because they've been away from those original realities for so long.
Right. I mean, so even if Bud is back to his original world, he no longer belongs there. Like
Right.
you said, I think I said in my recap, right? I mean, I think everyone could feel that, right? He's out of
Yeah,
place. He's Joe Hansen, Alice, coming out of the burning cabin. He doesn't know who she is. He just sets her down in
exactly.
the snow, walks away. Not a good guy.
As one would do, I guess, when you're a drunken failure in another universe.
And he makes some comment like he thinks he's just in his underwear. So I don't know. Maybe they haven't fully switched places if he's still feeling that way because the version that is in the apartment in LA is kind of in his underwear, I
Yeah,
guess. And so I don't know. But yeah, we did find out that Paul is not dead for the moment. He's not in good shape,
very much not in good shape.
but Henry Henry now as Bud has called an ambulance for him. So we'll see where all of that's going. It definitely seems like that dynamic is really central to how things are going to wrap up.
Yeah, and for as odd as it sounds, both seem to have an incentive or motivation to get back to where they were before, when I'm sure for a long time they thought that they did not want to, or that they did not want to be where they ended up. Maybe not so much for Bud, who I guess is left with a dead body in his floor, but Henry certainly wants to get back to his explanation, understanding of how he can fix this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas Bud, okay, he's been feeling resentment about being spit into this world where
Yeah.
what happened isn't what he remembered. So to what extent was Bud doing this on purpose? Of course, we saw him earlier on saying he's gonna, yeah, I'm coming for you, Henry. I made you piss your
Yeah.
pants, the way that it occurs in this episode doesn't seem intentional so much as a slippage.
Yeah.
And hasn't been a lot of talk about the lithium lately, but there is something of an implication of the lithium as doing something to block the slippage, which I don't know how we read that, but
Yeah, I think that Henry says to Magnus in this episode, I just took my pills. That's what I did to fix that. I just took my pills.
took my pills and got to work,
Yeah,
you
that's right.
know. Joe hasn't been taking her pills, you know. So
No.
at a certain level, it's almost like, is Constellation an extended advertisement for taking your damn pills? Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. But what do you think about the cabin stuff? The fire, I mean, it's kind of weird. Joe, she doesn't set the fire,
Yeah.
not on purpose, but accidentally she does, right? The one version of Joe sets her like kerosene lamp and then the wind blows and knocks it over and the cabin's on fire, but then she goes to no, she returns to the same cabin that's on fire, but when she gets inside, it's no longer on fire. Now she's in one of the cold cabins that's either one or two, but must be two because one version of Alice is in one of them and the other version of Alice is in another. And at first, I thought the cat was dead in one and alive in the other, which is a clear nod to Schrodinger's cat. But then there's also a scene where there's two cats, one of them's alive and the other one's frozen and dead, and all kinds of weird. And the cabin's not on fire, but there is fire within the world, it would seem, of the Hugo Simberg painting. And I don't know. Thoughts about all of this.
I have no idea what you just said, but I mean, from what from what I understand from those scenes is, that rundown, dilapidated cabin is the place where the Alices are able to find their counterpart. They're able to communicate. There's something there because, as you said, that cabin itself is not on fire, and yet I believe that's the one where Joe saves Alice from the smoke, right?
It
Um,
becomes on fire. It
becomes on
was
fire.
it's as though the fire escapes the painting.
Yes,
I
yes. So
struggled with how to put
approximately,
this in
yeah.
writing about it.
Wouldn't it be something if, all this talk about it, if the paintings were the actual liminal spaces this whole time? And, I think that we picked up on that pretty early.
Yeah, we did, right? And the change, I think there was a third version of the painting
Mhm.
in this episode. And I still don't have I feel like I still don't have a full line on it. I'm hoping to maybe land on a better interpretation
Yeah,
after next week. We only got one to go,
yeah.
so why rush it?
I
Are
think
we
that
going to
it,
get more information?
and I forget the name of the painting in this particular episode where it changes, but it is one again where the original painting has a picture of the devil. In our episode, we see that painting, but the devil is changed to the angel. So again, sort of these two
Yeah.
parts of the same of the same thing that are interchanging in this one space, whether again it's the painting, the cabin, or whatever.
Yeah, we'd previously seen the poor devil
Mhm.
in the place of the wounded angel. Now we see the wounded angel in the place of the poor devil, basically. Um, so
Yeah.
angels, devils, okay, this the symbolism is clear. How does that fit in with what's going on in Constellation overall? Um, is it like one fallen world? And no, because it's still a wounded angel. See again, I don't have a full interpretation yet. Hopefully I do when the season's over.
Now, I wonder how it will relate to that specific devil angel imagery change back and forth, relate to, for this idea of, say, Irina and Avalia, because we see in this episode,
Yeah.
we don't necessarily see Irina in this episode, but we see the version of Irina that we have not seen before physically, which is the Valia that appears to Alice at the end. And so, again, two wildly different, but still same versions of the same person. Both seemingly saying the same thing. Go, get your mother. Go. I can take you to your mother. She needs to be free from where she is. So again, I think that imagery sort of tracks between the two. That's just sort of my read on as I think about two wildly different versions of what could be the same thing. Irina and Valia are the closest to that. Maybe Henry and Bud as well, but Irina and Valia sort of fit that mold really well.
Yeah, I agree. And apparently Alice has seen the Valia before
Hmm.
and heard the Valia before. And this is very weird. So I feel the need to say here, there's no explaining this through reference to quantum mechanics.
No.
Whatever you make of all the other stuff, references to quantum entanglement, retrocausality, whatever, I'm not aware of anything whatsoever that could offer a possible explanation of a dead person appearing in a different reality and talking.
Yeah. Nope. That's just science fiction now, my friend. That's the world that we're in.
Yeah, we're outside of the realm of something you could relate to actual scientific theory. So what's going on here? Clearly, I think that's going to be central
Yeah.
because
Has to be.
apparently Joe has been taken into the care of Irina. Multiple people have said, "Oh, Irina understands what's going on. Irina's going to help you, right?"
Yeah.
And so you could draw that connection, I guess, with the angel and the devil. Is
Yeah.
Irina going to be helpful? Is she like the guardian angel, or is she more like the devil trying to deceive you
Yeah.
into accepting a reality that doesn't match up with what happened to you?
I, I think that is very likely to happen. There is, which won't necessarily say here, but there is a log line that exists for the finale that's out in the public. This is not, just something that's buried behind screeners or whatever, that sort of implies that there is some understanding and resolution coming, and it
Hmm.
involves where Joe is. And so I cannot help but think that this Irina Valia character is going to play into that, considering, again, from all the way back in the first scene, we see what we now understand to be Valia as the dead cosmonaut. And now, again, the last moments before this finale, we see it again. It's going to come up, I think, and play a major role. As you may have said, devil slash guardian angel. Who do we believe as we're trying to get to the bottom of things?
Yeah. And why is she saying, come with me, child?
Yeah.
Come away. See, I'll take you to your mama. No, you won't.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of possibility. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take you to the other reality where your mother's dead.
Yes. I did wanted to make
Maybe.
a reference to we've talked about the idea of this girl being named Alice, the references to Alice in Wonderland, the title of this episode being Through
Of
the Looking
course. Yeah.
Glass. And just interesting that in Through the Looking Glass, in that book, Alice is playing with a white kitten named Snowdrop, in, in, interestingly, right, considering where they are in the cabin,
Yeah.
and playing with another black kitten, right? So sort of this duality there, just sort of pondering the idea of what the world is like. And so now we get this idea of Alice here, two versions of her, two versions of the cat, Schrodinger's cat, just sort of this idea of through the looking glass, sort of find out what the real answers are to things that she's been trying to figure out for a long time. This is Alice, and through the looking glass now, this is, as we always thought, it's going to come down to one or maybe both versions of Alice going in search of answers of what's really happening here, maybe helping her mother along the way, maybe getting an understanding of or an acceptance of where both mothers are and what they're doing. But yeah, I think that they're using this as a device to set up what, certainly with Irina and Valia, but also what Alice will do in the next episode.
Yeah, I think so. And the references are definitely there.
Yeah,
They communicate through the mirror again.
right.
Um, I made the title of my recap a reference to something in the book, but I
Yeah.
don't have anything more to do with that. Right? It was like, what am I going to call this? The referencing the bit about what the name of the song is called. That's not the song. It's Addict's Eye. No, that's just what the name of the song is called. Maybe it fits in to some degree because there is a question of
Right.
how we talk about this stuff and how language lines up with reality
Yeah.
and these differences we're grappling with. So I think that's definitely a source of inspiration here, and that's
Yeah.
part of what's cool. They're clearly blending literary sources of inspiration with scientific ones and so on. But now we've got a science fiction show.
Yeah, I think they've done that very, very well. And it's interesting watching this show and then now going through Three Body Problem, where both have so far. I remember us talking about this in the first episode. Oh boy, how much quantum mechanics and theoretical physics I'm gonna have to understand to really appreciate this show. But they've done a good job of positing what is necessary and did that very early on, and it's helped us through it. We've not had to be burdened down by anything more. We can just sort of grow in the knowledge as the rest of the characters do throughout it.
Yeah, yeah. And well, to throw this in there, we've been talking about the Valia, we've talked about Irina, just to remind everyone, that she was what hit the ISS to cause the accident.
Yeah.
Back in episode 1.
Yes.
Is she also what did she also hit the ISS and cause the accident in the world where Paul survived?
Yeah, I think that's unknown at this point.
I think it's unknown.
Yeah.
I think I've seen some people suggesting you can like kind of see her floating in space or something, but I don't know. I haven't seen it. Give
Okay.
me a screenshot, because I don't see it. Um,
Yeah.
I don't see that indication. If not, though, what did happen there, right? How is there an accident in the world where the cow doesn't exist and the dead cosmonaut doesn't hit the space station and so on and so forth?
Exactly.
Again, maybe the cow device explains everything. I kind of hope not. It certainly doesn't explain the Valia
Yeah,
that
it does.
appears to Alice. Um, so we'll see where that's going. Oh, that was the other thing I want to say before we wrap up. Poor Magnus.
That guy, he's had a hard time of it.
Both Magnuses,
Yeah,
but in both realities, just I feel really bad for him.
I know. Just
Yeah,
get that guy back in the classroom, put him with his kids, let him have some time with Alice. He's going through it right now.
yeah. Well, one version of him, his wife died in space, but his daughter's being really weird. He doesn't know what to do. He thinks that that Alice just won't accept her mother's death, that she's in
Yeah.
that kind of denial, which would make sense. but now he's having to grapple with the fact that there actually is some more weird stuff going on.
Yeah.
And he sees Joe at one point, but it seems like he's still not sure if he's willing to believe that he actually saw that. So yeah, he's not in great shape. And then
Oh,
the other one just thinks his wife is super mentally ill and almost got their daughter killed.
that's right. And almost killed him in the process.
Yeah, exactly. So like, not great. Neither version's in a good spot.
Poor Magnus.
Poor
My guy
Magnus.
Magnus having a tough time.
So hopefully things work out for
We got one
him
more episode to find out.
some degree. Yeah, hopefully things work out. Yeah, one more episode to go. I just started thinking, what would a happy ending look like? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I don't know that a happy ending is possible.
I don't think that's where we're going.
And of course, we don't know whether they're planning further seasons. At least I've not seen anything about that. So we can speculate about that more after next week's episode. And who knows? Sometimes Apple TV Plus will like renew something right as the last
Mhm.
episode comes out. Um, or maybe this is a limited series. It's only these 8 episodes and it's a full
Yep.
story, and we'll see how it feels. And we'll be back talking about that next week. Anything else you want to hit on, Ryan, on this episode?
That's it. Really looking forward to this finale next week. We're gonna I won't be able to wait much longer after we get done recording here. I'm gonna go tackle it tonight, probably.
Right on. Yeah, looking forward to it. And we'll be back next week talking about episode 8, the season finale. Thanks always for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do leave us like a rating and review wherever you're listening. If you're on YouTube, you can like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can follow TV Obsessive on social media. Search for TV Obsessive. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Till then.